Hello, buff folks. It is March 2nd, 2025, and I'm head of programming Kai Perrignon, and I'm speaking with filmmaker Kalil Haddad. Khalil, thanks so much for screening with us and taking the time to talk to me today.
My pleasure.
Just to start us off, get us in the groove with kind of a basic question. Can you just talk to me about your filmmaking origins? Like, how'd you get into making movies?
Yeah, I started making movies when I was about 9 years old with my cousins. I remember my cousin came down to visit us one time in the summer, and they had like this like a toy camcorder, and we just started playing around and filming that and acting out little comedy skits, and that's kind of how I started when I was a kid. And then as I got older, went into high school, started moving into a more experimental kind of direction. I would say the kind of work I'm making now, I started making more when I was like 15-ish in that style. But then more professionally in like 2017 or so, I really started going full force with this. One of the ones you saw, Late Night Delight, was is technically my first film, and that one's from 2017. So I'd say that's the true origin, but there had been years prior where I was experimenting with different stuff and forms, and yeah.
And was there, like you said, you kind of shifted into what became close to what your current style is? Was there something that kind of precipitated that shift? Was there something that made you start working, got you to want to start working in more of the experimental vein?
It's funny. I feel like the shift came with it almost just like naturally maturing, making these more kind of juvenile comedy things. And then as I got older, wanting to say something more with my films. And so even this one that I referenced that I made when I was like 15, still I think has like themes of masculinity and sexuality. And those are all like themes that would pop up later in my work. I really started utilizing there. Um, but yeah, I think it was just about really wanting to treat it as a more serious thing and really trying to figure out what I could say and do with it and how I could make it different uh in my own way.
Rad, rad. And I like what you're talking about there, talking about Late Night Delight, which is both. I mean, it does feel early. It feels early watching, but also has so much of the stuff that comes through your later work. And I will get back to that a bit. I thought it was a good kind of
Yeah.
starting point to be like, it's all there from the start, or at least a lot of it is.
Just the
So
genesis, yeah.
the Genesis, and I'll hold myself back. We'll get back to it. All right. So, okay, next question is, okay, so both vampires drink blood, I drink sorrow, and his smell really fantastically evoke
Mhm.
like yearning in a very like romantic way in many ways. And also this kind of sense of obsessively running the history back through your mind like again and again and again. And but they do so in very different spaces. Vampires feels kind of like a city symphony. You're out and about a lot on the streets, and
Mhm.
his smell is really cramped interiors. I think also because the main character in that is like injured in some way, right? So, can you just talk to me about how you approach location as a tool in your filmmaking toolbox?
In terms of location, I mean, I always want to utilize evocative spaces. And for me, shooting vampires, that was shot during COVID. So this big, it's shot in Toronto, so this big city at night, but completely like isolated and lonely. And really want to know what that feels like. And I would say, like in contrast to like the loneliness of the beautiful room is empty, where it's this very empty space, but we're confined within this interior. So really wanting to look at like the vastness of the city, but how kind of isolating that can still feel, this sense of like urban alienation. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, that connection between
And
his smell interiors and the beautiful room interiors, different kind of claustrophobias, but both claustrophobias nonetheless.
mhm. And I would almost, I don't really think about, I've never really thought about it this way, but I think in terms of, like in an intentional way, I mean, but like, I really do think like his smell and vampires are very much companion pieces to each other. The alienation of this large city, but one we're outside, one we're inside. But funnily enough, they both use the exact same apartment.
Oh, okay. That's funny. And do you, the question I'm asking here is, how do you feel about Toronto as like a space? Like do you find like, what are the psychic vibes of Toronto to you?
I think Toronto is very gray, and it's very cold for a lot of the year. It's like -10 right now here. Um, and so I think especially like in the winter, which is when both those films are kind of roughly set. Um, it really is a time of alienation. A lot of people don't want to go out to things. It's way too cold, and so you end up spending a lot of time inside and and kind of what can that do as well when you're kind of just like left alone with your thoughts and memories as well. And I think a big theme in a lot of these films as well is the way that history in the past kind of ripples forward into the present and how that affects us still. And I think in terms of your initial question, the use of space. Um, for me, it's like I think a lot of my films like to make these contrasts between space, and I think that's how they're often used. In His Smell, the sunshine of the suburbs, I suppose, into this kind of the grayness of the city. Um, and this look at the past that in that film you might not see as a closeted teenager in the suburbs. You might not see that exactly as a place of freedom or a place that you have loving memories for. But then maybe when you come to the city and you feel that sense of alienation, maybe there is this bittersweet memory of that past location, and it takes on a whole new meaning to what it did before. And I think a lot of these films kind of play with that idea as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and again, you mentioned you were talking about this idea of time kind of rippling through everything, right? And
Yeah.
I really was attached to that specifically in in your work. Paul and Eileen had four children, and The Beautiful Room is Empty, which are both family portraits from different side of the family. And
Yes.
I guess could you talk more about this theme in the context of those two films?
The theme of
Time,
isolation or no,
time,
the history.
history. Yeah.
Right. The Beautiful Room is Empty. I began shooting that before I even kind of knew what the movie was going to be. My grandmother was moving out of this house. She had passed away, and so we were moving her stuff out of the house. And so I began filming this interior footage, knowing that I wanted to do something with it, but kind of was kind of open to what that might be in a sense. And I feel like I do this a lot. Where I'll film footage and I might not use it immediately, and I'll come back to it months or years later, and I'll kind of rejig that. And maybe we can talk about. Uh, I'm actually forgetting. Did you screen The Boys of Summer?
No, we haven't screened The Boys of Summer, but I did watch them. Good movie. Very reminded me of being a young man myself.
Yeah. But I just bring that up to say like that film and that trilogy that's a part of that was footage that I had shot years prior and then came back to and kind of remixed it. So that's why I referenced that. But so I had shot this footage for The Beautiful Room is Empty. And then sorry, Kai, I'm losing track of where we are at the moment.
That's cool. Right, we're talking about the like kind of idea of like history kind of like repeating and kind of like continually existing into the present tense.
Right. Um, No, and I found it fascinating being in there and moving all of this stuff. I found it fascinating being in my grandmother's house after she had passed and kind of moving everything out, and just thinking about the memories that this space holds, and and the lives that this space has affected. What does it mean for this family of seven to share this house and to live in such close proximity? And obviously that had effects on my aunt as well. So what are the ghosts that this space holds? And I think likewise with Paul and Eileen, what are the ghosts of these portraits, these moments just snapped in time, and our ability to be able to see an entire lifetime play out across 11 minutes. Like it was funny. I received a suitcase from my mom of just old family photographs, and that's how that film. That's kind of the genesis of that film. Um, was kind of examining like all of these stories that I had heard about from my mom, being able to like see them verbatim or a version of it through these photographs. And I didn't really ever know my grandfather, so my because he passed when I was really young. So my entire memory of him is through these stories of my mom and through these images. So it was a for me, this film was a way of marrying those two things and being able to put like a motion to these stories in a way that I had heard about for so long. Um, and I think likewise, after my grandmother on that side passed away too, this idea of all that's left of the time we spent in this space in this family house is in this suitcase. And after 4 decades of being in this house, that's all there is. And I find that rather haunting. This idea of being able to kind of build a life somewhere, and over time it kind of just dissipates. And but that's the cycle of life.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And Sorry, I'm just now just like we could go to like three different questions I got now off of that. Great answer. All right, I'm gonna kind of maybe I'll skip around a little bit. Okay. You were talking
Sure.
because you talked well, something last night you just said was talking about like seeing these old photographs and like the photographs are like these ghostly echoes, right? It's like you're seeing this whole history kind of
Hmm.
kept in here. And if we jump ahead to later in the program, we're for the taking of Jordan and the boy was found in harm and victim of circumstance. These are found footage movies essentially. They are built out of
Yeah.
a lot of old all male magazines, pornography, news footage, which to me kind of puts you in like a really nice lineage of filmmakers like William E. Jones and Liz Purcell. But I would say the difference between you and them is that your work is very sinister and quite scary often, at least documentaries. So uh, I so I was wondering first of all how you started working in this mode of kind of pulling from this old erotica and also in like the process of that. And then also do these materials, do you think they naturally lend themselves to horror or is there a lot of massaging that you do to make them fit this kind of tone?
No, I don't think they naturally lend themselves to horror. I think the horror for me comes from uh analytically really being able to think about what is behind this magazine, like going beneath the facade of it, because yeah, I mean naturally they're just these erotic magazines. They're very colorful, they're filled with hot guys. Why should I be scared of any of that? But it's the idea of thinking about who's really this person in this photograph, and where did they come from to end up in this magazine. um what like I and just that kind of thought allowed me to go into researching a lot of these older porn stars, and seeing that a lot of them really did have these kind of tragic backgrounds that one way or another kind of led them into this line of work, as a way of survival. And I think to acknowledge that human element of survival in contrast with the sunshine and rainbows, I suppose, no pun intended, rainbows, but of the way it's portrayed on the page, that's what really fascinated me. And to dig into these histories, and I think in a broader sense, like how that speaks to kind of the gay world of that time as well, and how these and has like relics of that period, we can kind of gain insight into the world that we've kind of left behind in one way, but also, as history does, the ripple effects that continue forward even into modern pornography and the way that so little has changed. Um, and I find that really fascinating. I would say, yeah, very specifically, like I think that Victim of Circumstance is very much even beyond anything pornographic. It is a critique of the gay world period of the 80s, and all the ways that that magazine takes that world in and then regurgitates it back out to its audience, and how that kind of fracturing of the material, how that affects the way that gay men see themselves within society.
Yeah, there's that really, I think, really great part in Victim Circumstance where you're directly quoting from like a zine piece about the difficulty of coming of age for gay teenagers, where they're often in these spaces that are inherently dangerous and predatory, but like there's the trade-off of like I get to learn how to be gay for an uncomfortable relationship, let's say. I thought that was a really effective way of yeah, bringing everything what you say just to the fore to make you really think about it while it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's uh it's also interesting because these magazines you're pulling from, I mean, it's you're pulling this kind of like real history out from like the fantasy, right? It's like there's this kind of tension
Yeah,
between the image and the material reality of it, which also kind of
yeah.
plays into something else that I find really interesting about your work, which is I can't find the exact question here, but you love a noisy image. You love it. You love like the visual noise, and I think it's a very I love it when you in your work because it really brings to the forefront the nature of the image and also just it being mediated by our screens and by you recording it and also then thinking about like the mediation of even putting these images in the magazine in the first place. So can I just ask you why do you like noise? What's your feeling about this kind of visual texture?
For me, noise feels real to me. Noise feels real to me, and I guess that's the only way I can really put it. Where when I see a crisp HD image, it feels artificial to me. It feels like a construct. And I like the idea of film feeling like this really lived in kind of grounded thing. And I think especially with these works, this idea of feeling like this is like a bootleg of a film or something, or maybe you discovered like on a tape in an abandoned warehouse, like giving those films specifically an intentionally kind of dirty vibe thematically. But then I also think that yeah, I think a dirty image feels like it has history to it in a way where an HD image just feels like contemporary here and now. And I don't find that interesting. I find film interesting because it allows us a window into history. And I find that fascinating into another world. And like to go back to victim circumstance, maybe a history we don't want to engage with, like to talk about the horror of it. I mean, for me, the horror is like I would be petrified of being, in a lot of ways, I suppose, of being a gay man in the '80s and thinking about everything that you're going to be struggling with, societally, politically, um, and I find that very haunting because if as a gay person, if I had been born a decade or two previously, my life would just be so radically different, and I would live, and not to say that gay people now don't live, depending on where you are, in a violent or a dangerous world, but I think especially in a Western sense, still in the '80s, this idea of danger kind of lurking around every corner, but at the same time, all that media being portrayed as about fucking or
Mhm.
about just sexuality. And I find that kind of conflict very fascinating. The idea of the escapism of the magazine.
Mm. Yeah, me too. Me too. That's, I mean, I'm into the vintage porn world as like as a space exact for this thing of just like seeing the real history poke through it and just looking on the margins of the images for stuff. And there's even something that your work
Yeah.
with that, which I think is just seeing like an old couch in footage. You know, you see someone doing sex act and you're just like, look
Hmm.
at the texture of that couch. That's a whole world in that couch in that wallpaper, you know?
Yes. Yeah,
So
definitely.
okay, sorry, I kind of bounced around here, so I'm not as organized as I could be. So okay,
Off your head.
let's go with okay. You mentioned you were talking about you just talked about the idea of let's say being queer in the past versus in the present tense, and I just kind of want to bounce off of that into the beautiful room is empty. And can you just talk
Hmm.
to, which is about your aunt, and can you talk to the origins of that project, how it became, how it started going? You talked about filming and how you started the filming the footage kind of originally without a super plan for it, but how did you start talking to your aunt about her coming of age experience or her coming of life experience, as it were, you know?
Yeah, so it stemmed from this previous film, and I don't believe you screened it just now. As I sat in this car, Um, that's a film about that I had made. That was my third film, and it was my first more like personal kind of film. It's a personal documentary about experimental documentary about like my coming out experience and being gay as a teenager. And my aunt, as she mentions in this film, came out a lot later in life. Maybe in like her, I think when she was like 50 or something. Like she had always been gay. She always had a partner, but and everybody kind of knew, but it was her roommate kind of thing. So she eventually kind of owned that at 50. And I think, and well, she said to me that like seeing that film that I had made as I sat in his car, she found really inspiring. And the fact that I was able to, at my age, kind of be so open about it and be able to discuss it, really moved her. And so it got us talking about how she wanted to kind of make a film about her process as well and what that meant for her coming out decades later and what this idea of like hiding did to her as a person, and I found that really fascinating. And so we initially started talking. I was recording this over Zoom during the pandemic. I made this in 2020, and I believe I'd shot the footage in 2019. So I held it for a few months, maybe summer 2019 until the spring. And then we started talking, and at first it was just a coming out. It was more of a coming out portrait. And then as it went on after a few interviews, she started telling me more about her history and her relationship with my uncle, and we got more into that. And it kind of it evolved into and thematically into something different and something new. But that was kind of the origins of that was her seeing as I sat in this car.
Wow, I mean, that's awesome. That's great. That inspired her. Uh, Also in this movie, I latched onto this kind of implicit parallel between of the in-betweenness of queer identity and national identity, as that side of your family is Palestinian Canadian, if I'm correct. Uh,
Yes.
is this something you were consciously playing with, slash, is your heritage something that you think like actively informs your work at all?
Well, I mean, not. I would say maybe not across my other films as much, or in as a direct way. This film was commissioned by the Toronto Palestine Film Festival, and I received a grant to make it. So this film, I did intend to focus more on a on the heritage of the family, as it were, and like the kind of cultural nature of that. But then, of course, as the film goes on, that's obviously an element tied into it. But then it kind of expands upon that and goes in different directions. But I would say, being a Palestinian, I think a lot of my work. I mean, I identify with more of like outside, like an outsider artist, I suppose, in many different ways. Being Palestinian, being queer, and just making underground films. I just yeah, I just always seem, and I am always inspired by like outsider musicians
Hmm.
and music in general. But I find it really fascinating, this idea of like an outsider coming into something. And even though I can't call myself a real outsider, I went to film school, I've been making films for years. I really like identify with that ethos of making things that are more on the fringe. And I think that comes down a lot, is influenced by my kind of intersecting identities in a lot of ways. Yeah,
Awesome. Great answer. Thank you. And you talked about music just then. Um,
yeah.
so I have two questions on music. One, which is just what are do you is music sorry. Do you have any musical influences that you think are affecting your work? Because I feel your movies are very musical. They're like sometimes it is like watching someone make like a noise industrial tape, just for me. So are there any musicians that you connect to in that way?
Yeah, I think like Vatican Shadow, Prurient, that music is all over like Victim of Circumstance especially. I was listening to a lot of that. And Taking of Jordan. It's funny. I think I'm really inspired by like albums, like specific projects, I suppose, over a lot of musicians. Like I always find it interesting when a musician can change so much between albums, and each piece can kind of stand as its own. And I think that's kind of what like someone like Bowie, who's constantly changing genres. And I feel like that's what, when I look at my films, I think of them in a musical way where I'm like, well, that's my industrial film, my industrial album, that's my cloud rap film. That's And I think of them in these kind of ways of like musical genres and what influences are being pulled for each film musically, that kind of help create that world. Like His Smell is totally like my cloud rap kind of film. And Boys of Summer is like a SoundCloud film. And that's really how I look at it, as each film has its kind of musical influence. Um, that's like it sonically builds itself around.
And is the music, is that like early on in the process? Is it like, are you cutting stuff together and then finding music, or are you like integrating the tunes as you go?
I'm integrating it as I go. So there's a lot of times where I'll hear a song, and I'll picture it, and I'll picture the edit like to this track, and it's sounding really good. It's looking good in my head, and then I'll sit down and it doesn't work at all. And then or maybe it works, but it needs to be at 80% speed or pitched up, and that's when I find like I'll visualize it in one way, and maybe it doesn't work exactly the way I thought it. And then it really is this process of discovery. Okay, well, it felt right, so how do I make it act like right on screen now? How do I transfer this abstract image into Premiere onto the screen? Um, I'm losing my train of thought a bit here.
That was good. That was good. Train
Is that
train
everything?
train came in, and also led
The
me to
train
the
came
next question.
in.
The train came to the station. It's cool, and it leads to our next
I thought the
question.
train had more for me.
We'll get more out of it here because what I'm asking now is that you talked about you need to slow down some tracks sometimes, or you need to slow down the image. You
Yeah,
also have a lot of distorted like pop music in your movies. Well, Late Night
yeah,
Delight opens with I think it's a dude jamming out to "Girls Just Want to Have Fun," if I'm not wrong.
yeah.
And
Vaporwave remix. Yeah, Late Night Light's my vaporwave movie.
Okay, your Vaporwave movie, yes, no, yeah, very much so. And the just the looks across the way in that movie, just people looking, like especially that bit where like there's the two people and like one of them looks to another person across like a bridge. That's very Vaporwave
Yeah.
to me. So, and there's a bit of like, I mean, Kenneth Anger irony to me a bit in this music usage. But also I think it goes back to what we're talking
Yes.
before about this kind of musical construction to your work. And can you just talk a bit about how you deploy these like more known tunes to your work? Like what's your thinking when you're getting into the pop music zone?
Well, it's so funny that you just mentioned anger there, though, because as my like first real official film, I would say Late Night Delight is very inspired by Kenneth Anger and his use of music. Like, I really love Custom Car Commandos, and I was really inspired by that making this film. But in terms of pop music, I mean, I always want a needle drop to elicit more of a vibe maybe than for it to be distinctly recognizable. I think when a song is more recognizable, like there's the use of Rich Girl in Tiger Eats a Baby, um which was Tiger screened?
No, it was not screened, but it's I think it's online, right?
Damn.
So people should check it out. And also the Boys of Summer
People
trilogy. I
should
think
check it out.
yeah, check them out. They'll want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of like a mainstream kind of pop use of that. But yeah, like Tiger to Baby has a Rich Girl Needle Drop in it, and that went because it's such a recognizable track. That's used in more of an ironic kind of way. Or in Boys of Summer, there's like a sample of Biggie that comes over like a white boy smoking. So it's more of like calling attention to the juxtaposition of things, I suppose, when it's a more known track or in Victim of Circumstance. That's a better example. You guys watched that one. um there's a the coda at the end of Video Killed the Radio Star that plays over images of the boy in the blue over the motorcycle. So I'd say they're like more of these when I use it like that, it's more of using the audience's kind of cultural memory to play off of that in a sense and to make a comment on how we think of that track or what that track represents or stands for in
Awesome.
a traditional sense.
Makes total sense. And now I'm thinking that we should just play Boys of Summer. So we'll see how the actual part of the day goes. People watching this right now, the program may have changed from the start of this interview to the end of the interview. Uh, okay, so I think that's most of my questions. I think I have a few more that are a little less specific, so we'll get into that zone. So
Sure.
first of all, we're screening your work at an underground film festival. Uh, you referred to yourself earlier as an underground filmmaker, and I'm going to ask you, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to be an underground filmmaker?
What does it mean to be an underground filmmaker? I think to be an underground filmmaker is to, in a lot of ways, forge your own path and to kind of disregard preconceived notions about what a film can or should be. And I think that like there's so much discovery to be left within the realm of filmmaking, and there's so many different modes to explore. Like I think that we forget that like film is like really one of the newest art forms. It's really only 130 years old, roughly. You know what I mean? And like, look how much painting evolved over centuries, right? Or sculptures, and so I think there's so much artistic exploration left. And I think that a lot of people get really bogged down in thinking. We were talking about HD video before, right? Like this is what a film should be. This is how it should look. This is how it should play out, and what it should represent. And I think, yeah, to be on the underground means that you're exploring things outside of that, and you're trying to forge these new paths. Um, and again, talking about outsider musicians, although I don't consider myself an outsider filmmaker, I'm inspired by outsider musicians because they a lot of times are people with no musical training, and they end up doing they accidentally make things that are really experimental and avant-garde and outside of what we would normally think of as music, but in its own way that becomes really beautiful and unique. And we see how bands even like the Shags, which are super outsider, like go on and inspire other like mainstream kind of rock musicians, or how yeah, or like I know that Kurt Cobain was inspired by Daniel Johnson, like, and I find that really like interesting as well, that like these kinds of artists who are making very like pure things, um how that work kind of can resonate in a much bigger way with other people because of its difference.
And I think especially now, we're saying it's so real because now with the internet, where you can access so much more stuff, right? Like it's so much easier for someone to stumble upon like one of these outsiders now in a way that they never would have in the past, and it just can influence a whole new generation of people. I think it's
Exactly.
really amazing. You just I mean, yeah, you can go online right now and you can find beautiful old erotic pornography that is very, very strange. And there are people
Mhm.
thinking about it right now, and they are making movies about it, and they are making movies like Victims of Circumstance about it.
Mhm.
So, uh,
And if I can, and sorry, if I can just speak to that as well, like, and that's what really got me interested about working with porn as archive too, is because of its outsider nature. I had always known that like about porno chic in the '70s, and that there were these porn films that were real films, that were like structured films. But when I discovered that there was this entire world of basically gay underground gay cinema that had been completely disregarded from the history books. I found that really fascinating. That these films in their day were, and these actors were incredibly popular, as popular as any kind of porn star could be now, even. But maybe even in a bigger way, because they would appear on the front of gay magazines, and they were in some ways more, even more mainstream celebrities. But they've been kind of lost to the sands of time. And I find that interesting that especially in the 80s or 70s, at a time when gay people weren't represented in mainstream media, they didn't have anywhere to look to see themselves on screen. They could see themselves here in porn films. But then at the same time, what is the effect of your identity being tied to that form of representation at the same time? Um, so yeah, the kind of whole outsider nature of porn as a or gay porn as a medium is really what got me working with this material.
well, I was actually going to follow up and ask you about specifically this, which is, are there any of these like gay porn films from the vintage era that really kind of specifically open your mind? Like when you're talking just then, I was thinking about Fred Halstead a lot, one of the greats, and also someone who was very affected by only being seen as this idealized object in some ways. But are there any other filmmakers from that era that specifically really spoke to you or speak to you?
I find Christopher Rage really interesting because he'll do things where he'll like blend documentary with porn. Like there's this one film of his called Street Kids, where he's just interviewing like young men who live on the street, and they like jerk off for him. Like it's insane. Like it's insane that he would even think to make this, I suppose, in a lot of ways. But I find it interesting, this idea of like him trying to take this like raw reality of these people's lives and mix it with erotica. And then also, what does that say about him in terms of like the nature of voyeurism or exploitation? Like, as I don't necessarily think it's a great film, but I think as a product, I think it's a historical product. I think it's really interesting. I think a lot of these films were mostly inspired by like the films of William Higgins, I would say, and you see his films pop up a lot across these found footage movies. And he was the first director that really that really ran like a twink porn studio and kind of went against the grain of what a porn star in the '70s was, where they're very macho, mustache, like had the whole clone look. And then William Higgins kind of subverted that with these blonde surfer boys, and that kind of became his aesthetic. Um, and then obviously that's a kind of archetype that we still see played out in mainstream porn to this day. So I find that like looking at his as the at him as like the genesis in a lot of ways of modern porn of that ilk. I find that really interesting, and his whole story. I'm actually working on another project right now that kind of digs more into William Higgins' work specifically, and the actors in his stable.
Can you speak a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, it's so I really consider these our porn archival films very much a film cycle, and it's a continuing cycle. Um, that don't necessarily cross over in narrative, but cross over in theme. So like the some of the boys you see in the Taking of Jordan or Victim Circumstance will pop back up in this next film, but this acts as more of like a documentary that traces the lives of his the myriad of porn stars that came into his orbit and kind of what happened to them.
Rad. Sounds. I'm excited. It sounds awesome.
Thank
Um,
you.
all right. Okay, we're coming up to the end here. So, okay, we talked. I've asked you. I basically asked you what's next. Unless is there anything else other than that in the works that you're also working on right now?
Always. There's always a few things. I'm usually juggling a few projects all at once. So I have another. It's more of like a B-side single if we're going to talk musically. It's more of like a micro. It's a micro short, so it's not as like a substantial as a thing. But I'm working on this new like 4 minute short that's also a porn archival thing, similar, I guess, to like the packaging of The Boy Was Stoned Unharmed, just like this little kind of like micro dose of something. Working on one of those, working on this much larger project about William Higgins simultaneously, and then I'm also developing like a narrative film at the same time. I find that in the past 2 years, I'll make a narrative film every like 2 years maybe. Um, so I'm working on a follow up to his smell at the moment, like a proper narrative short. And then I'm also fourth thing, I'm also working on a photo film like Paul and Eileen, where it's all told through photos, but it's a 3D film
Like
and 3D film that has actors in it, but the acting is told through the photography and the photos are all in 3D.
fascinating. Wow. Again,
So those
like
four things I would say,
more things down.
and I just kind of bounce between them all.
The 3D one.
Hmm.
Like you're gonna get some like 3D glasses at the screenings going. Is this that kind of 3D we're talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. It's a red and blue 3D glasses. I'm using a native 3D film camera. So it's all going to be told through these still images, but it's going to involve actors and scenes, but take the form of Paul and Eileen and then add 3D.
Wow. Sounds awesome. Sounds like some like early 1900s diorama technology going on here. So that sounds
Yeah, literally.
uh, all right. I guess I okay. Two last ones to close this out. Kind of some foreign questions, but they'll be fun. One, is there any questions that you wish I'd asked you? Anything that you really want to talk about? You from any of the movies or regardless, about anything?
That's a good ass question. Is there anything else I'd like to talk about? Um, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I'm down to talk about anything. I don't know. Was there any, do you find that there's anything reoccurring in the films that kind of piqued your interest? Like maybe elements that don't draw attention to themselves, but that you see popping up across various works, maybe? Like less overt kind of
Let's
stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess what really struck out to me across them was this. Well, I'm less so the kind of erotic documentary works, but definitely Late Night Delight and his smell on Vampires Drink Blood, and The Boys of Summer, and also Paul and Eileen and The Beautiful Room is Empty. Is this tone you cultivate is very difficult because it's both there's a certain nostalgia to some of them, and there's a certain sweetness, and also there's a certain sinisterness on top of it at the same time. Like even his smell, which is ultimately, I mean, it's a kind of a heartbreak movie as I interpret it. But like
Hmm.
there's just something in there that just feels uncomfortable even when it's revving up. Is this something that you're intentionally playing with, or am I off the mark and reading like a sinister? I mean, am I just like retroactively thinking the boy was found unharmed and putting that in all your movies? You know?
No, like I wouldn't say there's a sinisterness in terms of like the horror of a movie, like The Boy Was Found Unharmed, like in comparison to his smell. But I think the bleakness of it for sure is an intentional thing, and like I mean, like even the use for me, even the use of montage, like I wanna, I think the way I edit my movies even is the way that we would experience memories. We don't see them in like a linear fashion in terms of the way they play out. We see them in these moments, and so I think to contrast these moments together, and within the scope of someone's life, especially, and the way that like the music can switch up and the tone completely changes. Yeah, just really finding the true essence of these moments, and life is all about conflicts as well. Like I can be having an amazing day and then I can get some horrible news that'll completely change everything, right? In the most basic kind of way, right? And so I think to represent the entire spectrum of kind of human feeling is what a lot of these works intend to do. Like Victim of Circumstance, to be in that situation as Scott is would be horrific and depressing and would weigh on you. But then there's also this sense of longing and love and lust, and those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. They all exist within human experience. And so I think it's about finding ways to kind of like formally kind of meld those two modes together, because yeah, you'd also don't want a complete kind of switch up where it makes no sense at the same time, right? So it's about like how does one feeling kind of bleed into the next and then influence the future decisions and future actions. And so I think that's what a lot of these films are kind of playing around with that mode emotionally.
Great answer. Wow, great answer to my like really pull that out of the air question. Thank you. Okay, I could honestly I could ask you like 20 more questions, but I'm gonna wrap this up
We can
because
keep going. We can keep going.
I'm gonna okay. I'll ask you. Okay, I'm gonna throw out two more. One, I'm gonna ask you kind of like a bigger question, which is maybe uh just kind of bounce off what you said, do you think that we can ever be unburdened by memory? Do you think that, because I know I'm a person who can be walking around, you just said, something bad can happen to change your day, but I can be walking around and something from 10 years ago can flash through me and just, I feel so heavy, And I feel that in these movies a lot of the time, the sense of just, as we said before, like kind of looping through history. Do you think that's a thing you can be free of ever in a healthy way?
I think you can move forward from your history, but I don't think it can ever entirely leave you. And I think that's what a lot of these films ultimately say. That no matter where, like his smell, you're still haunted by this guy from your past, this tragedy from your past. Jordan, you're still haunted by your former lives. Victim of circumstance, even after he moves to California, he's still haunted by the burden of what his life was elsewhere. So I think a lot of these films deal with this theme of these attempts to be unburdened by the past, and ultimately, that idea maybe being harder to cultivate than it might seem. Um, and yeah, I don't want to sound too depressing about it, but yeah, I do think there is something to and I think especially also like as a queer person as well, like think about the ways that uh you're taught to think about yourself as a young person, or maybe you're bullied, or the way other people make you feel about yourself, and how that kind of self-perception can also shape you moving forward as well. And and I think yeah, like stuff like that. I think there's ways to overcome things, and I think there's ways to yeah to kind of overcome things, but I think that like your past will always stay with you even if you overcome it. There's still that memory of kind of what was, and that'll still have some kind of weight on you potentially.
Hmm.
Like they always like I think I think like with Elon Musk, right? Like he was so clearly like a kid that was bullied in school, and to this day he's still trying to act cool and overcome how he was made to feel as a kid.
Like still so childlike in that horrible way, right? Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I just saw something about Elon this morning, so I had to bring that. But
It's fair enough. He's on our minds. I mean, I think one of the things that your movies are good at doing is evoking this ambient sense of the world, even without directly commenting on it. And part of that is talking about these different emotions existing at the same time, and this kind of time kind of being flat on some level. And this also speaks to a kind of different tension. We asked me about recurring things in your work that I picked up on as well. And another one is this kind of tension between, let's say, like the image of someone and like the actual person, like the materiality versus the image we have,
yes,
like literally in photographs, but also even just talk about your aunt having to present this idea of like, I'm not gay, I just have a roommate or whatever, right? Like, do you
yeah.
think that, like, one, if you just want to speak broadly about that in your work, but two, do you think it's possible to reconcile the public and the private selves, as it were?
Is it possible to reconcile them? Hmm. Is it possible to reconcile public and private selves? I I think in some ways, but I don't think in a one-to-one way. And again, looking at victim of circumstance, there's the public self of the porn star and there's the private, right? And they can exist in tandem, like in tandem in the sense that like this person who's doing sex work, right, could like has their own kind of experiences with sexuality and with things that kind of led them to where they are, but I think they also exist at odds because even the character in that wants sex from someone that he loves, really. But the public version is the exact opposite. And also just to yeah, take it to Elon again. It's like you can be the richest man in the world. You can have everything and you're still haunted by when you were made to feel like you had not.
Mhm.
And I find that interesting too. I don't know if there's really a way to reconcile the public and the private. I think they exist in tandem, and I think a lot of the times they can fight each other. And I think there's ways to marry elements of each, but I think there's always going to be the interiority of a person and then the exterior that they present. And the exterior will contain hints of what that interior could fully entail, but it'll never fully give us access into that. Again, looking at this porn star, we wouldn't understand their interior world. We see them as they exist in front of us. And what as they exist in front of us can can speak to what their private life is, like in the case of Scott. But I don't think they can ever fully be rectified together.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a fair hypothesis. I also think it's interesting, important specifically we're talking about this because like I think porn really puts to the forefront this tension because when someone's having sex on screen, it is a performance, but they're also actually having sex on screen, right? Like it is this like weird thing where
Yeah.
there is like reality, even though it is an inherently artificial scenario, there is some kernel of like ultimate reality in there that can never really quite go away. I I don't have any follow up on that. That's just a kind of thought.
No, I think that like yeah, I think that but that's why I think it's interesting to explore these private lives, like where so much media presents us what's on the surface. And yeah, and so I think that like because even like yeah, maybe you guys should show the Boys of Summer because I was gonna make a comparison. Like the actor from His Smell appears in Boys of Summer. Not necessarily, not intentionally as the same character, but you could definitely interpret it that way. And so to see his character in Boys of Summer and to see how he presents in that film, and then to contrast that with His Smell, I think that gives you the exactly what you're talking about. This like the exterior expression and the interior, what's hiding underneath this kid that we just see out and about, what's going through his mind.
All right, well, definitely. Well, everyone is there. You'll have seen Boys of Summer. It'll be a fun
Perfect.
getting here.
Perfect.
Um, all right, so I'm gonna ask you. I am gonna wrap this up in a minute, but I'm gonna get two rapid fire, just purely for my curiosity questions. And I'm gonna ask you a final question. One, this is purely just like, have do we have common reference points here? One, have you seen the fall of communism as seen through gay pornography?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was
Yeah.
hoping. Great movie. I
Great.
wish if you last year was it last year? Uh, with me, some people, Stag Vision put on a screening of you would have loved this. It was a triple feature. It was Ask Anybody, The Fall of Communism as seen through gay pornography, Sex Tool, and Sex Demon at a cinema. And what a
What?
night that was. Yeah.
As a quadruple feature?
Yeah, just the triple. It was well as the triple with the short, but it was just triple X, double,
Okay.
triple feature, quarter feature. I did intros for it.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. There was like, it's a good vibe when you suddenly turn around and the crowd is just now all middle-aged gay men. You're like, the vibe has shifted. It's cool. So that was a great movie.
That's amazing. Oh my God. Yeah, no, Toronto would never put on anything like that here. It's crazy. That's really cool. We actually,
There's no space to show
oh,
the intense, kind of scary gay pornos from back in the day.
well, not back in the day, but actually, this was it actually might be a new thing starting. There's this new at the beginning of February. Victim of Circumstance preceded the Toronto premiere of Bruce LaBruce's new film, The Visitor,
Cool.
and it was like a big event, and it was marketed as like 19 plus. It was like starting at like 9 p.m. kind of thing. It was like a later screening. And it was a sold out screening, and there was all these people who came out just to watch scary gay porn. So it might be the dawn of something new in the city now after the success of that program. But yeah, up until then, like we haven't had Ask Anybody come to Toronto. We haven't had the restoration of Sex Demon come. So Taking of Jordan was actually banned from a cinema in Toronto for being too pornographic. So
That's kind of cool. It's kind
yeah. No,
of,
I mean I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. It's kind of jokes, but it's kind of sick. But yeah, but no, there's yeah, Toronto in a lot of ways is like weirdly conservative about like kind of screening anything that's like pornographic or so yeah, the fact that you guys had that like triple feature is yeah, really sick.
I do think it was like sort of on the DL, but that's how I have to go sometimes.
Oh, DL guys? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Second, last question of like satiate my curiosity. Are you a Dennis Cooper fan? Are you the fan of the Sluts in particular?
No, it's funny. I had never come across Dennis Cooper's work until I released Taking of Jordan, and then I saw like reviews making kind of comparisons to it. It wasn't on my radar at all. But now that I've heard that comparison, it makes me really as fascinating as his work sounds, it makes me not want to engage with it because I'm like, well, I'm like, I came to this conclusion on my own. I don't want to be like, I don't want to be influenced now by Mr. Cooper. So, yeah, his work sounds
Parallel
sick, but no,
immensely.
I haven't read any of it.
That's
Sorry.
delightful because yeah, I think maybe the first time I watched the movie, someone texted me, was like someone adapted Dennis Cooper, like not like not actually, someone just
Oh,
channeled him, and I was like, here we go. And I did watch it, and I was like, he's got it. But that's delightful that it's parallel invention instead. Uh, okay. My final question for you is: are there any other filmmakers working right now whose work you really connect with?
yeah. I would say Jonathan Vinnell and Caroline Pogge are like have been like kind of very big inspirations. I love their film Baby Anger. And I think the way that and although it's not a direct inspiration, I think kind of to what you were saying before, it's like I think the way that they're able to um really meld these disparate kind of emotions together into a singular piece. Like I find that film Baby Anger of theirs, or like Jessica Forever, like their feature, like so bittersweet, so isolated and filled with longing, but also with so much heart and emotion, while also being narrative, while also being experimental. So I'd say in terms of contemporary, like I really love their work.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's great. I think we're done. Any final sentiments you want to impart? Any final words before we close out the interview?
I just want to say thank you so much to everybody for coming to the screening. I really hope you enjoyed the films. I have some more up on my Vimeo with vimeo.com/Kalil Haddad that you can go check out. That film I referenced, Tiger Eats a Baby, that didn't screen today, will be up there along with some other films as well. So, yeah, just thank you. And I hope everybody enjoyed the films.
Cheers, dude. Awesome.
And,
Uh,
and yeah, and Kai, thank you so much for such an incredible program. I hope it wasn't too heavy for the audience altogether, all in one go. So,
they know what they're getting into. They'll be fine.
yeah.
Well, I hope. And if you're not, it's cool. Come talk to me. I'll be friendly and I'm polite.